Today's lesson. I've selected three of the poems out of our collection of poetry. And these three are all romantic poems, and they are from where it all started. These are all from England, um, and they're from three of the original romantics. So this first one is by William Wordsworth, and it's called The Daffodils. It's also called I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. If you look it up in an anthology, you won't find a title next to it, but it's a super famous poem. Remember that the Romantics were all about a few things that we can count on. One of them is the individual, and you notice right here in the title, I. So it's all about an individual and the way this individual feels. So feelings are super important to romantics. And where do we have these poems occur? Well, these feelings occur always in nature. So these three things are super important. This particular poem has a really consistent rhyme scheme and also a really consistent meter. So the rhyme scheme, you'll notice cloud rhymes with crowd, hills, daffodils. So it's A, B, and then there's a couplet at the end of every one. Trees rhymes with breeze. And that's consistent all throughout the poem. The other thing that you've got is the meter. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills. Da 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 da. And there are four beats in every line, so we can call that tetrameter. And because the beats are the second syllable, the second half of every beat is emphasized, it's iambic. So the meter here is iambic tetrameter or tetrameter. All right, so what's the poem all about? Well, we've got an individual here. He's wandering and he's lonely. Just like in the previous one, we've got our lone waterfowl, we've got our lonesome, our spider, and our, just like those two situations, we've got somebody who's lonely. So he's lonely, and all of a sudden he sees a host of golden daffodils. And he looks at these daffodils, and he notices that the daffodils are fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Well, okay, so the daffodils are personified here. They're doing something that human beings do, they're dancing. Um, they're compared to something vast, continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way. Um, and so he sees them, and again he sees them tossing their heads in sprightly dance. Sprightly means happy. So you've got these dancing flowers, and this is what brings this lonely poet joy. And of course, the dancing continues. The waves behind them, beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. Notice we've got dancing water. The lake that's near them is dancing, but also they are, and they are gleeful. Um, and they're also happy. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. Jocund means happy, or jocular, or cheerful, or funny. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. So, this idea of wealth, well, nature brings us wealth, being in nature. And then he's got his conclusion. And the conclusion is a memory. He says, for oft when on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood. In other words, if I'm sad and sitting on my couch at home, alone again, just like he was lonely here, he has the benefit of this memory. And in this memory, he says, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. Remember, being by yourself is not necessarily bad. Here, it's blissful. Well, why is it blissful? Because he has a memory of nature. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. So for that one, you can feel free to consider these questions for discussion. Okay, moving on. The tiger. The tiger is another wonder. I call it a wonder poem, and the reason I call it a wonder poem is we've got a an apostrophe here directly addressed to a tiger, and the question that we have for that tiger is, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In other words, where did you come from? What or who is your maker? Of course, the answer is, just like everything else, the tiger is made by God. And William Blake was a visionary. He saw angels. He believed very much in this idea that God was everywhere and that God was was a mixture. He wasn't this typical view of goodness is not what William Blake thought of when he thought of God. He thought of an all-powerful creature or being that was able not only to make lambs and other nice little animals, but also had the power to make something like a tiger. And when he talks about this, when he asks this tiger questions, he's asking questions that seem to connect the maker of the tiger to something other than our typical view of heaven. Check it out. In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? Well, all of a sudden we've got fire associated with the tiger and therefore with the maker. On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? Again, this is all about wings and fire. This sounds like angels, but a different kind of angel from what we're used to associating with. And again, we get, with this idea of fire, we also get this idea of a blacksmith. And so we've got these very kind of, you know, we usually associate blacksmith with hell or the underworld. We've got the Roman god Vulcan, who hammers out the armor for people here, or for the gods. Here we've got this question: what the hammer? What the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil? What dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? Here we've got this idea of deadly terrors in the Creator, but again, it's the Creator of something here on earth. And so he asks at the end, when the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? So there's always this question of, where did you come from? Who is your maker? What is your maker like? And William Blake, this mystic, seems to believe that the creator of the tiger, God, is a figure that's much more interesting than just the old guy with the white beard. Finally, his conclusion is similar to the beginning. He only changes one word. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? This idea that whoever made the tiger was doing something daring. So I hope you'll consider these as these questions for discussion. Um, they all. This is a pretty interesting poem, and if you like William Blake, there's lots more where this came from. Hit me, Ozymandias by Shelley, another one of the original Romantics. In this one, we've got all kinds of really cool stuff going on. I love this poem. It begins with our individual, another individual, an I. But most of this poem, interestingly enough, is spoken by somebody else. So the initial narrator just says, I met a traveler from an antique land who said. And then everything after that is this traveler explaining this to our narrator. So that's a second voice. What's even cooler is there's a third voice, and the third voice comes in right here. Now, as we read it, you're going to notice that this third voice is actually an inscription. an inscription that was commissioned to be carved by a king named Ozymandias, who calls himself King of Kings. And he says, with no hint of irony, "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." Well, why would he say that? Well, he's obviously this king that has carved this enormous statue, and this enormous statue is celebrating something magnificent, probably an incredible kingdom. But you'll notice that what we see, or what this traveler says he saw, is not an incredible kingdom. It's two vast and trunkless legs of stone. And where are they? In the desert. So if you're going to draw a picture of this, it's just two stone legs sticking up out of the desert. They're enormous. There's no torso attached to them. Why not? Well, clearly this statue is broken, and we see right next to these legs, half sunk, a shattered visage lies. Well, that shattered visage, that shattered face lying next to it, is the only other piece of this statue that's left. So we've got two legs without a body, and then next to it, a severed head. And that severed head still has certain characteristics on it. We've got a frown, we've got a wrinkled lip, we've got a sneer, and all of these things are characteristics of this king, Ozymandias, who thought he was so mighty that he had this statue made. And at the base of the statue, underneath those legs that now don't hold anything up at all, is a ridiculous caption. "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." Well, in the moment that he had this carved, clearly there was something for somebody to look at. Now there's very little. But this idea of "look on my works, ye mighty, and despair" has a double meaning. There's a huge irony here. Ozymandias said something that he thought would mean this is so impressive that you should despair when you look on it, when in fact now we can look on it and say, you know what will make the mighty despair is the idea that try as you might to make something that lasts forever, you'll never be able to achieve it. It can't be done. So, the traveler has this beautiful picture of irony to share with everybody. And he shares it in this poem, which is called a sonnet. But it's not a traditional sonnet. When Shakespeare wrote sonnets, they were always divided into four parts. There was always a four-line section, another four-line section, a third four-line section, and then a couplet and the end. You'll notice that the ending here isn't a couplet. In fact, the rhyme schemes here are very unusual. So I've highlighted the rhymes so we can check them out. So in the first section, this is pretty standard. Antique land rhymes with antique stand. Legs of stone, well, there's a half rhyme here. Lies, whose frown? So stone and frown have this kind of half rhyme thing going on. And then we've got cold command. So antique land on the sand and the sneer of cold command. All of these things form the first section. But you'll notice it's not an even number. This is a 5-line beginning. And that's very rare. It's not a traditional way to do a sonnet. So here we're in the next session. Passions red, heart that fed. And then we've got lifeless things here and King of Kings down here. Notice that lifeless things, which describes all of the statue, is compared to or rhymed with this phrase King of Kings. Of course, King of Kings is this is what we called Jesus, the Son of God, King of Kings. Ozymandias calls him the same thing, but clearly Ozymandias loses out in this long term idea. So we've got these two together, and then here we've got this odd rhyme. Words appear, but words appear is going to be rhymed with ye mighty and despair. Appear and despair. And then below that, boundless and bare. The cool thing about this set of rhymes is these words appear. Ye mighty and despair. Well, yes, it's a desperate situation. And so the inscription itself talks about other people despairing, but if you look at it, it's a very, like the statue is also in despair. Ozymandias, looking up from the grave, would also be in despair. And look at the final part of that set of rhymes. Boundless and bare. This is what is left of this thing. And then, round the decay, the lone and level sands stretch far away. So the desert goes on forever, and the statue is done for. I love the way Shelley works out this massive ironic statement in this poem. Um, and he does it with such an inventive and interesting rhyme scheme. Um, there's on top of that, there's all kinds of sounds happening here. I'll just show you one because it's really important, and then you can discover others on your own. But let's look at this first initial line. So, two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies. Listen to all those S's. This is what we call a sibilance. And this is one of a wonderful example of how the use of sibilance can convey a feeling. So what does sibilance do? Well, it sounds like the wind, that whoosh, 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 which is what we've got, a lonely, windy desert. It also could give the sense of an ocean. And this desert is like an ocean. It's vast, it's endless, and it swallows things up, especially the monuments of the egotistical. Just that one little idea of sound, I hope, sets you off looking for other interesting things. Also, I'd encourage you to check out the discussion questions here at the bottom. There's plenty to talk about here, and I hope you enjoy thinking about this poem. That's it for now. Hope you enjoyed watching. Thank you.